Okay, the recording has started. Warm welcome everyone to this webinar. Our guest speakers, Angela and Shona, will introduce themselves in a moment. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Jean Davis, and I am the chair of the Association of British Paediatric Nurses. We have got colleagues on the call. Fiona Smith is one of the fellows from ABPN, and we have other members who are officers of ABPN. So very warm welcome to you all again, and may I hand over now to Angela. Thank you, Angela.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Jean. Can everybody hear me okay? Is that all right? Excellent. Okay, so my name's Angela Horsley. I'm a children's nurse by background. I retired from the NHS in 2021, and since then I've done quite a lot of work with the third sector, and I've done 2 pieces of work with Hospice UK in reference to transition. Other things I do, I'm an honorary assistant professor at the University of Nottingham, and I also do quite a lot of work with BBC Children in Need, and I also am a volunteer counsellor for Childline. So I do quite a lot, and it's a very varied life that I have. So we're going to be talking this afternoon about from small beginnings to big discussions. And by way of introduction, we know that the number of children and young people with life-limiting conditions is increasing, and a growing number of those children and young people are living into adulthood. And over the past, when it comes to transition, we've heard much about programmes of care for young people transitioning from children to adult services in acute settings, but much less about hospice care. But that's changing. And over the next 4 years, Hospice UK is leading a programme with an aim to improve transition from children to adult hospice services. And in 2024, I undertook a review for Hospice UK and was involved in helping them to identify 4 regional centres of learning where hospice services are working well with local commissioners and other care providers to ensure a smooth transition service. And the Prince and Princess of Wales Hospice in Glasgow, Scotland, is one of those chosen centres. And for information, and this is really important, this is predominantly an adult hospice with a core young adult service. And this service has emerged as a leading model across Scotland and has been recognised by Hospice UK in their Tackling Inequalities Award. And today it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Shona Laidlaw from that hospice to you. Shona is the specialist doctor and clinical lead for the young adult service. And the clinical lead element is relatively new, been in post about 8 months within the hospice, but creating that role demonstrates how important they think young adults are when providing their care, including transition. And again, the role has been created at a time when, as we know, finances are really stretched in all hospices. And over the past few years, I've seen how this service has developed, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my involvement with both Shona and the recently retired Director of Clinical Services, Fiona Wiley. Shona will share her experience of leading these very important and sometimes difficult discussions with young adults who require hospice care, and will bring themes to life by sharing examples from practice within the young adult service. So what I say is over to you, Shona. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jean and Angela, for this opportunity. I'm just going to share my slides. Now, I can see you, and can I just confirm that everyone can see my slides? Fabulous. So as I said, thanks so much for this opportunity. My focus today is on the power of simple conversations, the small beginnings. I think people consider transition to be complicated and problematic, but actually, if you start small, this is what forms the foundation of a safe, compassionate, and timely transition from child services to adult hospice services for young adults with life limiting or, in Scotland, life shortening conditions. What we're going to talk about today is really to explore transition not as a single event, but as an administrative handover, but as a deeply human relational process that unfolds over time. In the context of hospice and palliative care for young adults with life-limiting conditions, transition is increasingly important as more young people are living longer and moving between the services. The aim of this presentation is really to reframe transition as something built through small, early conversations that lay the ground for trust, understanding, and choice long before moments of crisis arrive. Rather than focusing solely on the structure of transition or pathways of transition, the session, I hope, emphasises the role of everyday interactions in shaping how safe and supported a young person feels as their needs change. The purpose is also to share learning from my practice within young adult hospice care, highlighting how early identification, gentle conversations, and relationship-based working can reduce distress not only for the young adults but also their families. These conversations are often informal, adaptive, and responsive to readiness, but yet they carry a real significant weight in shaping future decisions. By grounding transition in curiosity about the person rather than an assumption, about their condition, professionals can actually support them to have their voice heard and for them to be autonomous and seen with dignity and act in confidence. Another aim, lots of aims, is to encourage reflection across your services on how transition is currently approached, where there might be some gaps, and how coordination can be improved. Transitions frequently involve multiple systems, including health, social care, education, and mental health services, but these services are not always aligned. This can leave young adults and their families carrying the burden of coordination at times of great vulnerability. By the end of the session, I hope that you are encouraged to consider how small changes in language, timing, and approach can create a more predictable and compassionate experience. Ultimately, my goal is to show that big, complex decisions are best supported when they are rooted in simple conversations that begin early and evolve over time. These are two of our young adults who attend our hub on a Monday. And throughout the story today, hopefully that I've got time to do this, but I'm going to share a vignette of a young adult. And I want to tell you about them. They're 17. They have a life-limiting complex disability. They've been managed by paediatrics since infancy. They are physically fragile but cognitively sharp, creative, and deeply private. There are no adult services known to this individual yet. The hospice, I'm going to call him Sam, is a place that people go to die. At this stage, there's no transition planned, there's no crisis, and there's no handover time. There's just uncertainty. So let's consider a point where young adults and their families are standing on the edge of a cliff, awaiting adult services. Transition, I cannot stress enough, is not a handover, but a relational process. It's often mistakenly understood as a handover between services, marked by eligibility criteria, referral letters, and age thresholds. However, for young adults with life-limiting conditions, this framing is not only inadequate, but potentially harmful. And I always remember Angela talking of transition as a time of great risk to young adults. Transition is better understood as a gradual relational process that unfolds over years rather than months. It's shaped by trust, familiarity, and a sense of being known as a person rather than a diagnosis. When transition is treated as an administrative process, it risks becoming fragmented and crisis driven, increasing anxiety for young adults and families alike. A relational approach recognises their readiness for transition, and this varies widely. It's influenced by their physical health, their emotional development, their family support and dynamics, but also previous experiences of care. Early low pressure conversations allow professionals to explore what matters to the young person. A simple question, what does a good day look like for you? Or what does a hard day look like for you? And what fears or uncertainties that they may hold about the future. These discussions are not about forcing decisions, but about opening a space for reflection and choice. This, over time, will build confidence and reduces fear of the unknown. Importantly, these relational transitions work also supports continuity when health deteriorates. Where relationships are already established, care can adapt seamlessly without the shock of a sudden changes in personnel and approach. They feel held, patients feel held rather than abandoned, and professionals can respond in ways that are aligned with previously expressed values and preferences. Seeing transition as a relational also highlights the importance of consistency, clear communication, and collaboration across boundaries. It challenges services to slow down, start earlier, and invest in the human connections that make complex systems navigatable. Is that right? In doing so, transition becomes less about moving on and more about moving forward together. Bringing you back to Sam, the first conversation I had with him didn't happen in clinic. It happened in the cafe. He had an iron brew. There were no notes, there was no agenda. The opening question wasn't about diagnosis, it was simply, tell me about yourself. He talked for 10 minutes about music, digital art, but also how exhausting it is to be seen as the disabled person and how he sees his body as broken and ugly. Nothing was achieved as such, but something shifted during that conversation. And he said that was the first time an adult service felt interested in who I am as a person. The power of conversation. As we say, early conversations are the foundation of effective transition, yet they are often overlooked in favour of more formal planning processes. These conversations don't need to be complex or medicalised. In fact, their strength lies in the simplicity. Tell me about yourself. What does a good day look like, a bad day? Invite these young people to share what matters most to them in their own words. These discussions frequently take place in informal, non-clinical spaces and can be woven into routine care over time. Early starting is crucial. When conversations begin at crisis point, there is no space for exploration without pressure. Early, and the young adults can revisit topics as their understanding and circumstances change, and professionals can adapt over time with readiness. This helps to avoid rushed decision making later on and reduces the likelihood of transition being experienced as something that is done to the person instead of something they are actively involved in. Early conversation also plays a key role in identifying unmet needs. And here in Scotland, we use the Shinari Wellbeing Framework, which is based on the GERFIC piece of legislation. By listening closely, we can pick up on the soft signs of distress. We can pick up on emerging symptoms or gaps in support that are not yet visible through formal assessments. This allows time to build relationships, coordinate input from the wider multidisciplinary team, and create a safe, emotional and clinical runway for future change. These small beginnings accumulate into a strong relational base, enabling young adults to approach childhood and changing services and future care planning with great confidence and clarity. So back to Sam. Over the next few months, we have short, informal contacts. There's no pressure to talk about dying. There's a space to opt in or out. Another question, what makes a good day? He said being able to eat with friends, choosing when carers can come, controlling what's shared with permission. That conversation revealed missed needs, tensions with existing plans, but an emerging sense of autonomy, not through assessment, but through listening. If you think about the services and the need for voices to be heard, and that's one of our main aims at the young adult service at Prince and Princess of Wales, is that the voice is being heard. And some practice examples are included here. Our transitional clinics, so we started working with Chas just prior to the COVID pandemic, where we identified 12 young adults who would perhaps be suitable for transition between child and adult services. We demonstrated how relational approaches works in real settings. There was information shared by Chas about who we were and what services we could offer. We offered what transition actually meant in reality for them. They would have a visit to the hospice. They'd have coffee and cake in our cafe, where there was no pressure to talk about diagnosis, rather just come and see the building. We brought together the children and adult services for a joint clinic in a shared space, whether that was at Chas or the young adult's home or at our hospice. And that allowed early identification of unmet needs, whether they were physical, psychosocial, or spiritual. These clinics weren't just about transfer of care, but about building the relationships long before the transition actually occurred. The young adults would have access to our artists, our creative artists, our art service, our music therapist, our complementary therapists, but also our hubs where they could come along and meet peers and parents could meet other parents. They benefited from seeing services working together collaboratively rather than isolation. And these clinics have continued now. We successfully transitioned 7 of those initial 12 young adults. 2 unfortunately died during the transition project, and 3 had their needs met by other care organisations or establishments. We've now got 9 on our caseload and are working with Chas to identify more young adults, but also using that as a basis. We've got an MDT with the hospital paediatric palliative and supportive care team as well. So these joint clinics are working very well. Another area of practice is really supporting the young adult autonomy. I don't know if you know what the word gallus means. It's a good Scottish word for cheeky, forthright, and outspoken. Yes. And they love discussing things about enjoyment or identity or about their independence. And sometimes we actually work as advocates for them. A couple of examples that I've been involved in is a young man who, at the age of 14, had not been properly consented for a video fluoroscopy, and he lost his right to eat, and was fed through a peg tube. Fast forward a number of years, and he questioned that as that he had a human right to actually be fed orally, but unfortunately his social work team and care supporters didn't feel that that was correct. So we supported him to explore whether further fluoroscopy would be relevant and important for him. He discussed this with a formal advocacy, but also explored it with a human rights lawyer, and he gained much from that support. He really demonstrated that he desired normality. He wanted to be a young adult who could go out and not return home to be fed by his mum or dad. When these values are understood early, professionals can work creatively to balance this safety with quality of life rather than defaulting to restrictive decisions made under pressure. Education pathways and early support. We looked at our referrals and noticed that there was one glaringly obvious team that weren't referring to our services, and that was education. Looking at it, our children, our young adults are in education somewhere in the region of 260 days a year for 5 to 6 hours a day. And we felt that they were ultimately placed in a really good position to recognise if a young person was deteriorating. They were missing school, they were missing appointments, their families were increasingly stressed. They might not know the diagnosis, but they recognise those little changes. So we worked together with, first of all, educational psychologists on a standard operating sort of policy and a pathway to think, well, how can we do this while supporting the young adults? Anonymity and ensuring sort of the confidence isn't broken. And this has been recognised across Glasgow as a transition pathway which will support early identification of children at school who might otherwise miss out on the opportunity to attend our services. We don't want it to be by accident that people stumble across our service. It just allowed us to broaden our referral criteria and help families feel less alone. Across a lot of examples that I could give, there's a consistent theme that emerges, and that's that confidence is gained through early relational work, and it can be transformative. It takes time to build confidence and trust, but this empowers the young adults, it strengthens the partnership with families, and just creates a smoother, more compassionate transition across the services. Now back to Sam. What happens next? There's cracks identified in his services. There's no paediatric neurology team. He's got no adult neurology follow-up. Education are withdrawing their support, and the GP is unaware of the complexity. His parents are quietly holding everything together. I haven't realised how many things I'm juggling until you've laid it out before me. The hospice didn't fix it, but they named it. They coordinated conversations, they held MGTs, and they slowed the pace. And that really mattered. Hearing the adult voice isn't necessarily about conversation, it's also about through poetry. And this young man that's shown on the screen just now is in his early 40s and has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And he's actually written a range of poems that he's self-published in 3 books. So it's amazing to see him grow as an individual and for him to share his voice. Having a conversation about advanced care planning or future care planning with this individual is really difficult and he shies away from it. But he has been able to share deep, deep themes of loneliness and isolation through his poetry. So we've talked about that it takes time, that it needs to be proactive and not reactive. We need to bring all of the services together, and I think that we do that well at Prince and Princess of Wales. We want to be able to prevent a crisis, whatever that may look like for the young adult and their family. So mapping the whole team of care helps to create clarity about roles, responsibilities, and gaps. Common challenges include the absence of adult equivalent to community paediatricians, delayed access to adult neurology. 67% of our young adults in transition are not mapped to adult neurology and all have complex neurodisabilities. There's limited mental health support. And without that coordination, families frequently become the default care coordinators, increasing their strength and inequity. Proactive planning is essential given the medical fragility of these young people. Treatment escalation planning and advanced care planning should be introduced early and reviewed regularly. They're framed as ongoing conversations and shouldn't be shied away from. When built on trust, these conversations and discussions can explore hopes and fears and goals in a way that feels flexible and safe. But nothing is fixed. These plans can change over time when circumstances change. Effective coordination and early planning helps prevent crisis-driven decisions, might in fact reduce emergency admissions and family distress. When deterioration occurs, existing relationships enable seamless, compassionate care that aligns with previously expressed wishes. Transition becomes predictable rather than abrupt. And families feel known and supported. In this way, mapping, coordination, and planning are not bureaucratic tasks, but relational acts that protect dignity, choice, and well-being. So this is another young man well known to our service, and he has the most beautiful ACP document that I have ever seen. His parents wrote a poem based on a sort of Dr. Seuss, which is this young man's favourite poet of choice. Perhaps if we've got time at the end, I can read it to you, but just now I'm going to carry on. And back to Sam. So the advanced care planning came much, much later for them. There wasn't a formal meeting. There wasn't a document. It just started with, okay, let's think about what might happen if you become more unwell, if things get harder. What would you want people to know about you and understand about you? He talked about the fear of losing control, losing his voice. He didn't want rushed into an ambulance and rushed to the hospital. He wanted familiar people if things changed. The team were clear. Nothing is written in stone. And for him, for Sam, that safety made the conversation possible. 2 years later, Sam deteriorated unexpectedly, but the adult staff already knew him. The family didn't have to explain everything about him. Escalation plans existed and decisions weren't rushed. Sam stayed where they wanted to be. Care felt predictable, calm, and human. And later his parents said, we felt as if he was seen, he was known, and he was safe. So the key messages from today, and I'm sure that everybody might have a key message of their own or a light bulb moment. But if you can take away that transition is actually built on a human connection, that small early conversations have a profound impact on how young adults and their families experience change. By starting early, moving slowly, and remaining curious about the person behind the condition, professionals can support transition the transition that is compassionate, coordinated, and very much grounded in trust. Effective transition work really requires services to look beyond handovers and pathways and to invest in those relationships that span time and boundaries. Mapping the whole system of care does take time, but when we coordinate across the disciplines, engage families and young people as partners to contribute, we reduce fragmentation and anxiety. And importantly, we keep the young adults at the centre of all decisions, and the process reflects their choices, what matters to them, and not what systems fit easiest. When early identification, relational work, and thoughtful planning come together, big and often difficult decisions can be made gently. Transitions become less about loss and more about continuity, dignity, and choice. By committing to these small beginnings, services can support young adults to navigate adulthood and uncertainty with greater confidence. This is another one of our young patients at the Van Gogh exhibition. Just to finish off. And I've also included just at the end some useful links that Fiona will share after the meeting. 2 of them are videos. One of them, A Crazy Young Magic, is a piece that our young adults made with a social enterprise supported by a Scottish comedian who I know that you will not know, but her name is Karen Dunbar. And they are rapping in this video. And there's also 2 reports if you haven't seen those. But I will stop sharing now. Here we go. And hand over to you.
Thank you, Shona. There is time to read the poem, you know.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yes.
I will share it.
Thank you.
So this was his name is Robert, and he is now 21 and sort of looking to transition from um, residential care home to his to another alternative place of care. So his mum wrote this for him to share with individuals. I've been known for my massive smile for a while and my love of the ladies. I am a real Slim Shady. I'm Roberta the Casanova, a real supernova. Woo me with stories from Dr. Zeus. With their rhythm and rhyme, we'll have a great time. When I'm out and with the tap of your foot, we'll have a right hoot. When I'm out in a chair, I'm going anywhere. I like to get pushed in the form of a snake, so happy my head will soon begin to shake. I love the feeling of wind in my hair, and if I get wet, I really don't care. I love the feeling of water from the hose running through my fingers and toes. I also love planting, find it quite enchanting, and the smell of any herb is truly superb. I love the sounds of all birds, especially the geese. When we feed them with bread, they are such a showpiece. When I'm anxious or in pain, I like to practice deep breathing. So you start and I'll follow and I'll find it quite easy. Everyone thinks I love rap, but when I'm not well, it's quite crap. I'd rather be lying in down, supported in bed, with calm sounds and stories in my head. When asking me to help, speak slowly, quietly, and don't yelp. When asking me to move, you need to adjust to my groove. When getting me changed and ready in reverse, it really would help we did it the same way, night or day, the same time each way, the way I would anticipate what to do, and we wouldn't end up in the bezel nut stew. The most special people in my life are my twin brother, my dad, and my half daft mother. But this is not all. Oh no, that is not all. There are so many more friends I've made over the years, some of them so close. We've shared hugs, smiles, and tears. So the important question is what truly matters to my devoted family is that even if the shit's hitting the fan, when I'm in my chair or midair or lying out in my divan, that all together, all as if have formed the most wonderful master plan. As Dr. Zeus said, that way we will succeed 98.75% guaranteed.
Thank you so much, Shona. I think that's rounded off the session absolutely the right way. Thank you very much, Shona and Angela, for the presentation and what you've told us so far. Now, we'll go over to the people who have joined us in the meeting. I did ask for if there were any questions to go in the chat. There aren't any questions in the chat, so we will invite people to give any comments or come in and ask any questions. So over to you, our guests, please. Right, Angela first and then Fiona.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And thank you, Shona, for joining me today. I suppose in some respects, I've got a question for everybody. You know, we've heard about, you know, from small beginnings to those big discussions. And for me, it would be really great if people felt able to share, you know, if they've started ever one of those, you know, conversations, starting, you know, just from a simple point of view, how's your day or whatever, and, you know, feeling able to share it with everybody. Don't all shout at once.
While they're thinking, we'll just take Fiona's point, shall we?
Reflecting on your presentation and reflecting on my career, while things may not have moved as fast as one would wish in terms of transition, I do think things have moved forward in many places. and including in palliative care settings. And some of those discussions are taking place. I believe, reflecting again, that some of the professionals today, both nurses and doctors, are being better prepared to have some of those, in inverted commas, difficult conversations and discussions, and starting things earlier. I do recall at one point, for example, when I was responsible for neonatal units, having to speak to a particular consultant who was finding it very difficult to have a difficult conversation with some parents. The nursing staff could see that this baby was deteriorating, and the consultant was continuing to provide interventions. Yet, on discussion with the parents, they would have liked to have taken the baby home. To be at home and to be supported, or indeed to go to a children's hospice. So I think things have moved forward, but perhaps not as fast or as far as some of us would like.
Mhm. Thank you for that, Fiona. We're still waiting maybe for other contributions. May I ask in the interim, were there specific training needs to do with, you know, providing the type of care that was required, or did people feel comfortable with the level of expertise and knowledge and skills that they had?
I think that's a really good question, Jean. And certainly, we are the only hospice in Scotland that has a young adult service. So, first and sort of foremost, so when the idea was suggested, we started exceptionally small, but we knew that there would be some questions asked. We went out to the medical team and the nursing staff to ask them about their concerns or their worries, to identify their learning needs. The majority were, of concerns were, but they're children, but we don't understand their conditions. And, we simply replied, I understand that. Let's get some of the paediatricians in to deliver training. But actually, you do have the skills to deliver care to these individuals, because children become adults and their symptom management is the same regardless of the condition. And this was actually, we had a session at the Hospice UK, mainly attended by adult hospices, which was really reassuring, where we went through a case study and actually demonstrated to them that they already have the skills to support this emerging population. One of the areas that we're still finding is actually quite tricky is communication with parents, and how that dynamic is different from our other adult patients who have older family members who advocate for them or care for them. But with a parent coming in who has always looked after this young person for their whole life, handing over care to our staff is very, very difficult, and they struggle with that. They're seen often as difficult families, or challenging families, which is a real shame. They're just trying to doing their best for their children, my child, my adult, and we need to do some more work on that, really.
Thank you. Please come in. You've obviously, we're grateful that you've attended the webinar, and we really would like to hear. Christine, yes, please come in.
Yeah, I really, from the commission point of view, my background, and it was lovely to hear Fiona say she was a neonatal nurse, which is what I was from Great Ormond Street too many years ago. But for me, I mean, I've dealt with a call this morning, and it's about listening, really listening, asking the right questions, but actually listening and watching, observing. I mean, even in the 80s, people always said, you know, don't watch the monitor, watch the child.
Yes.
And I think that's still important even now, the body language, and it's sometimes what's not said that's so valuable. And I think that's really important. But thank everyone for today's presentation, because you know it's just invaluable for me and everyone, I'm sure. And it really just makes us think, you know, what has been put in place. And I agree, some things are so slow, you know, that it's a shame that it hasn't been put in already. But it's around making sure that we can improve and that we're advocates for the children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want to come back, Shona? Oh, sorry, Fiona. Shona, do you want to come back to Christine's point and then Fiona can come back in?
Yeah, no, definitely. Thank you, Christine. I think it's interesting that we do hope so much that things have moved forward. But fundamentally, I think we are all busier and we're forgetting about communication and that almost that mother's intuition and the soft signs of deterioration and trying to get to know how a mum recognises that their child or young person is ill takes a lot of time. And I think there's lots of passionate people involved in transition, but we have no succession planning. You know, if those passionate individuals leave, who's going to follow on behind them? My hope at the moment is that the curriculum for the new palliative medicine registrars coming through now includes transition, but it's a very tick box exercise. It's understanding about Duchenne muscular dystrophy, understanding about cystic fibrosis, the importance of multidisciplinary team working. So I think, if you could all go out and almost like touch 5 individuals that you would like to become passionate about transition, especially if they're in the adult world, so that you're not pushing and you really need to pull from the adult services, then that would be wonderful.
Thank you. Fiona, please come back in.
Well, I'll pick up that last point. I mean, if there's some messages that we could get out in our newsletter or in our social media around this particular issue, we'd be happy to assist. So we'll leave it to yourself and Angela to pull something together that you think might be appropriate. But the other thing is there some training or not training, some resources or something that would help some of the students, for example, in terms of starting those conversations with parents? Because quite often some of the parents may be reluctant to allow the young person to start some of those conversations. Just a thought.
Angela.
Yeah, I mean, and just in reference to transition, if you were to go onto the Hospice UK website, and again, Fiona, we can give you that link, there's some really good resources. And I say that because I started those resources when I was working for Hospice UK in 2021. So there are some really good things on there for everybody to look at. And one of the reports that Shona flagged from a reference point of view is the report called Being Curious and Confident. And again, that sort of like gives some really good focus as to how to start some of those conversations. I mentioned earlier the piece of work that I did for Hospice UK that identified these 4 centres of learning. I mentioned obviously the Prince and Princess of Wales because Shona was, presenting today, but other ones, and it's sort of like thinking about those centres of learning where you're all working. So St Oswald's Hospice is another one of those centres of learning, and that's in the northeast. Tiafan in Wales, they're another centre of learning. And then the Rainbows Hospice, Children's Hospice in Loughborough, Leicestershire, is another one of those centres as well. And over the next 4 years, what will happen is they will, start to pull together again many more resources for all of the local, groups. And I think that's really important. I don't know, Shona, whether or not you want to say anything from your point of view, now being one of those centres, and what that means for you as a hospice.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Angela. It's so I think that you will be aware of the Burdett nursing sort of transition work and the results that came out of that. The Hospice UK project is allowing each centre to work independently and to showcase what is working for them. So it's not going to produce the same. There's not going to be sort of data saturation, and that we are all working very differently, and that's exciting. Part of the work that we're doing at Prince and Princess of Wales is about education services, so education and the educational psychologists. But it's also, we're in a unique position in that we have 8 hospices in our surrounding area that our young adults come from. So we have 54 young adults on our caseload from 11 local authorities, 4 health boards, and we have 8 hospices in the surrounding area that could be supporting these young adults. So a lot of what we're going to be doing is actually upskilling and educating the adult hospices, by first of all ensuring that they want to get involved, by identifying sort of a key worker. And then, as you asked, Jean, is about identifying their sort of concerns and their learning needs and upskilling from there. But the other 3 centres are already exceptionally well established. And we're also working with our young adults to produce a resource for healthcare professionals about what they really need to know about transition. So that's completely young adult led, which is exciting.
Thank you. May I add something to this? My memory's taking me back to the Children and Young People Act 2014 Scotland, where every child had a named person identifying additional needs, working with the national Getting It Right for Every Child framework, and the transitional arrangements you would imagine would have been identified very early on, with a smooth transfer and many conversations already taking place in a much easier way than they might have been in the other 3 UK countries. So do you want to say anything about that at all?
I think, personally, I think that GIRFIC is an amazing tool to be able to use, and it's used throughout primary school and into secondary. And we're the only hospice in Scotland that actually uses it into our adult population. So it's easy for us to use as young people. But unfortunately, I don't think that health was considered as largely as it should have been. We've had 2 iterations of transition bills at Scottish Parliament, both that have fallen, neither of which included health. It was about independent living and education and employability, which I think was hugely remiss of those who took the bill forward. The key professional that was identified was typically a school head teacher. And it just didn't really come to fruition. It didn't have that same impact on health, unfortunately. And so hopefully this centre of learning is supposed to be regional. We cannot possibly take on Scotland as a region because vast differences and geographical, etc., etc. But our hope is that we can influence transition at GG and C level, Greater Glasgow and Clyde, which is the largest health board, and hopefully, not to be sort of too grandiose in our thinking, influence national policy.
Thank you. Thank you. Did you want to come back on that one, Angela?
No, not at all. No, I think Shona described that very well.
Thank you. May I come to our guests who've joined us? Are there any, we have a few minutes still. Any other observations you would like to make, please, if you don't have any questions? Any things you might want to take forward in your own areas now? Yes, please, Mary, come in.
Hello. A really interesting talk, and I am aware that we're talking with the NMC about the future of nursing, and there's always this situation over the years. I'm retired now, but my last job was as a lecturer in university, and it was a constant sort of battle. Why do we need children's nurses? You know, why can't we just have a generic nurse? And I thought this really highlighted that we have this understanding that, you know, our children are, regardless of what's wrong with them, they're growing into adults. So they need adult services. And we're aware of a child who might transition with, say, diabetes, cystic fibrosis, cancer. But for the child who has a life-limiting illness and may die in early adulthood, that's an area that we perhaps haven't really given an awful lot of thought to. And perhaps that's more ammunition for us to use with the NMC, that we already have these skills. The adult nurse won't, because they're not aware of the issues. We have. So another reason why you need to have children's nurses, that we're being successful and our children are actually growing up, regardless of what their underlying condition is. I don't know if I've said that well enough, but
Yes, you have. Thank you, Mary. Yes, would you like to respond?
Angela, do you have?
Yeah, I can respond.
Thank you.
I mean, it's quite interesting, isn't it? The whole thing of, you know, the requirement for children's nurses v the more of a generic nurse. I mean, it is evident that, you know, children and young people have specific needs, but I think one of the things when it comes to transition is that real importance of the working together with other colleagues as well. And I think, you know, one of the things that Shona has demonstrated this afternoon is that. But I think in some respects, whoever cares for, you know, said young adult, young person, they do need the appropriate skills in order to be able to do that. And, you know, communication as a skill is key within this. You know, I've just been involved in the whole thing with the University of Nottingham and the fact that, you know, as you know, a lot of universities at the moment, they're looking at their children's nursing and contemplating no longer having, you know, that training, which, you know, for me on screen is ludicrous.
Yes,
actually,
yes.
Because, you know, those skills are required, I believe.
Totally agree.
More of a comment, probably more than an answer to your question. But again, I think it does illustrate the importance of having, you know, the different fields, branch of nursing, whatever, you know, it's being called at the moment. And I do think that's really important, saying that as a children and young person's nurse.
Absolutely. Yes, we can make a very, very strong case for our existence as children's nurses. We are going to celebrate National Children's Nurses Day on the 30th of June to say, look at what we do and the difference we make. And the point I was making about GERVEC, the National Practice Model, really was that when they called for evidence in the Scottish Parliament about transition years and years and years ago, young people spoke really eloquently about how they felt about not having the really great wraparound services to transfer into. And the health minister at the time said to those young people and to us who were representing different organisations, speaking and giving the evidence to the Scottish Parliament, we were told, and it was followed up by a letter to say, you do not need to worry because the named person will take responsibility for the effective transition into adult services. So that was just an additional thing to bring to this conversation. So, Shona, you may have been aware of of all that came, to our attention, that we were told not to worry.
I think, yeah, we're now 12 years on, Jean, and I am worried about the state
Yes,
of adult services.
yes,
And I think this is probably a contentious issue, but there's almost a moral injustice in, this safe care and improved standards and the improving numbers of children living into adulthood who are then literally facing a void where there are no services for them to transition onto. Um, and I've raised that sort of association of pediatric palliative medicine.
yeah.
Sort of people agree with you, but how do we actually bring adult services into line and to hold them accountable? I don't know.
Would be interesting for the first test case to go to court, wouldn't it, Shona?
Yes, it would.
Maybe,
It would definitely be.
maybe a young person will bring that test case. We should encourage it, shouldn't we?
We should do. We
Yeah.
should do.
Any final comments from you both, Shona and Angela?
I mean, from me, I think this has been some great, almost like key things for people to consider and to take it back into practice and think about how they will implement that, back at base. Because I think it's great when people do attend a webinar, but, even if there's just one, thing that was said this afternoon that you link up with and then, start having those conversations back at base with other colleagues and, continue to be an advocate for children, young people, young adults, and an advocate as well for really trying to improve transition for your for the population that you care for, and consider where those gaps are and how you can again start to have conversations with others, get around those tables where potentially those conversations being had, and make your voice heard.
Thank you. Some people, yes, they're saying they've lots to think about and they have to leave now. Andre is leaving us. Yes, so Shona, do you have any last comments you would like to make?
No, I think I have commented throughout. I just want to, the slides will be shared and my contact details are on them. So if anybody does want to hear more about what we're doing at Prince and Princess Wales or the Hospice UK sort of Centres of Learning, I'm happy for you to reach out to me.
That's excellent, thank you. I'll just go to my colleague Fiona now with some practicalities about the availability of this webinar, Fiona.
Well, in due course, Jean will share the recording with me and we will place on the website, similarly with the slides as well. And I'll be in touch, maybe asking for a contribution to our future newsletter on the subject, if that's permissible.
That's fine. You'd
Right.
like the slides PDF'd, wouldn't you, Fiona?
Yes, please, Angela.
Yeah, thank you. So Shona probably
I-
can do
I think
that. That'd be
Shona
great.
knows that because I emailed earlier.
Yeah, that's great. Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed to everyone for spending your valuable time with us. I am going to stop the recording now. For Shona and Angela, thanks for coming in from guests who've been with us on the chat. They're sending their thanks to you. Just going to stop the recording now.